This is the brand new MSI Claw, one of the most anticipated handheld gaming devices to release this year. And in this video, we are going to break down everything you need to know about it and is it worth actually buying. So this was an unexpected release when I was attending CES 2024. Usually at MSI, they do laptops, motherboards, and so on. But when we checked out the booth, I was like, what the hell is this little device that they've got here? Now this looks like the Asus ROG Ally, the Steam Deck, stuff that we've sort of seen before, that Lenovo one as well. But there's a huge difference compared to all of those competitors, and this is an Intel-based system. All the other ones run AMD, sort of like AMD processors and so on, whereas this is Intel's very first sort of handheld gaming processor chip, so we're getting completely different performance and a few other features on a completely new generation of chip and architecture. Now, before we get into my overall thoughts of actually testing and playing some games on the MSI Claw, let's go through some of the key specs and also some of the things that it does slightly differently. So coming in at a price of around $699, this system will be releasing in sort of Q2 of 2024. So you'd expect that sort of like springtime, so it's not too far away. Now, price-wise is exactly the same as the Asus ROG Ally, which I think is its main competitor that it's going for. So obviously, because the displays, there's a lot of similarities in terms of the display technology. It's literally almost identical. So this is its key competitor. And for your $699, you're getting an Intel Core Ultra 5 and also 512 gigabytes of NVMe SSD storage, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and it's also running Windows 11. I really like this feature of it where you could switch between, because I've owned a Steam Deck in the past, and obviously that runs like a Linux sort of thing for the desktop side of stuff. Whereas with this, you can jump into Windows 11, have a complete desktop experience. That means you can install a much larger range of games, Steam, Origin, Ubisoft games, stuff on the Epic launcher as well, like Fortnite and so on. And also while we're discussing the performance and specs, let's take a quick look at the Intel CPU. So this is the Intel Core Ultra 7, it's 16-core processor and also has got ARC graphics. Now I'm going to be interested to see how the ARC graphics performs, because obviously if you put an Intel CPU and an ARC GPU inside of your like main desktop system, it has really cool technology that sort of leverages both the Intel architecture of the CPU and the graphics card, which gives you a little bit of a boost in FPS compared to having like an Intel CPU and an Nvidia graphics card or an AMD graphics card. They sort of work together in tandem to just give you a little bit better performance. It's very clever what it does. So I think it will leverage both of the CPU and GPU very well inside of this little processor for the handheld system. This might hopefully result in a much more efficient chip that gives you better battery life, but also better FPS in certain titles. Obviously, once the device releases in a couple of months, we can test this extensively, compare it to the Asus ROG Ally and obviously the Steam Deck that are running the AMD CPUs. But for now, my assumption would be that it could be slightly more efficient. The reason why I believe it could be more efficient is because of its power profiles that it's got. So inside of the MSI Claw, there's multiple different power profiles that you can choose from. You could do this on the Asus ROG and Steam Deck, basically effectively how much fan noise the system is generating and obviously the power draw for the battery life. This has got a much higher power mode than the ROG Ally. You can run it at 40 watts versus 30 watts on the Asus variation. But interestingly, the lowest power profile is only 15 watts on the MSI Claw versus 10 watts on the Asus ROG Ally. So if you want to run any form of emulators on there, the Asus ROG Ally can actually run at much less power draw, obviously resulting in much better battery life for that style of gaming. But it does show that you'll be able to get higher performance, pumping more power through the system when you run it in that higher mode. So you could expect higher graphic settings and also FPS, but obviously maybe just slightly worse battery life if you are running it at 40 watts in that mode. It does also have similar cooling modes that are found on the MSI motherboards. Usually for when you're overclocking, you've got like these cooler boost modes that you can activate on the desktop motherboards. That is present within the MSI Claw, but the fan noise is excessively high when you do run it in this mode, so it could be quite irritating for somebody that's next to you. But from some other reviewers that I was chatting with, they found that it didn't really need to be in this cooler boost mode. You could sort of run it in normal fan mode, and it was sort of unnecessary. So it'd be interesting to see whether there's any extra performance you can get out of the system when you get your hands on the retail version, why this mode actually exists. Now let's discuss the efficiency of this Intel CPU just briefly for a moment here. Now, when it comes to the actual battery, it does have a 35% bigger battery than the Asus ROG Ally inside of this MSI Claw. So this is obviously going to naturally result in a higher amount of battery life and hours of active gaming on this handheld device. However, because of the efficiency of this new Intel chip versus the AMD one, MSI claim that you can get around 50% more battery life out of the MSI Claw, which is a lot of extra gaming. And this is probably one of the biggest weak points of things like the Steam Deck and also the ROG Ally, is the amount of hours you can actually play on the system when you're going out and about. You know, I think when I had my Steam Deck and we tested it, it was maybe like, was it like 2-3 hours, maybe 4 hours at a push, sort of playing games like Spider-Man, very intense games. But obviously if you're traveling on like a 10-12 hour flight, that's not much use. Obviously this is currently just a manufacturer claim and we need to test it in the real world once it launches. But that is a huge step in the right direction for this portable gaming format. And also a massive improvement over previous Intel architecture for these style of devices, which back in the day used to run really loud, were also terrible on battery and overall performance as a whole. So when it comes to the display inside of the MSI Claw, it is rumored to be the exact same display inside of the Asus ROG Ally. They look very similar when you look at them, but also the spec is the same. It's like a 1080p 7-inch display, 120 Hertz. But I do believe that the MSI version has got variable refresh rate, so that obviously will hopefully result in a much smoother gameplay experience with obviously the higher refresh rate gaming if you can pump the FPS that high. So when it comes to the overall aesthetic and design of the MSI Claw, it's got loads of different buttons, very similar again to the Steam Deck and ROG Ally. You've got some little pro buttons on the back that makes it great for games like Street Fighter, and those sort of things where you want those extra triggers at the rear. It's obviously got like a D-pad and also your standard sort of controller buttons that you find. Key difference is with the sort of A, B, X, Y buttons, there's some RGB lighting hidden under these. They're very dim, you can't really see it because there's sort of like a coating over these buttons, but that is present. So aesthetically, it does look a lot different and also very gamery with all of the RGB effects on the thumbsticks and so on. But for me personally, I found the overall build quality was a little bit rubbish. Right, so this is probably one of the hottest products of CES. This is the new MSI Claw. This is sort of like the new handheld device to compete with the Asus ROG, is it? That was super popular last year. Probably the better device, if we're honest. We've tried that out here at the event, and now obviously MSI has just released this. This device is cool, but it feels pretty cheap compared to the Asus one that we had a look at. So it's got like a real cheap plastic build quality, and mate, these triggers, they're a joke. These triggers are like absolute joke. I don't know how this will like sort of perform in robust over like, because you've got to bear in mind this thing's gonna be thrown in your backpack, and the joysticks are gonna get pushed absolutely everywhere. So you'd have to really take it on the road to test it. But fundamentally, it's a pretty cool little device, this Claw right here. So it's got a 7-inch full HD 1080p display, pretty good. Performance-wise, it's decent. We played Assassin's Creed Mirage on this yesterday when we had a little quick play on it. Overall, I was pretty happy. It was dropping frames a little bit, but you also have to bear in mind this thing has been on 24/7 for like a few days, so it's had a lot of hardcore gaming, so it could be a little bit hot why that was happening. But it does have multiple different modes that you can run this in, which could potentially make it a little bit better than something like the Valve Steam Deck. Obviously the Steam Deck can run like Linux, stuff like that. You can get Windows on it, but it's a bit of a pain. So you basically switch between Steam full picture mode and Steam standard. But this comes with Windows 11 Pro built onto it, so you can literally use this as like a portable desktop laptop. You vibe with Windows 11, access lots of different apps, then switch into the handheld MSI dashboard for more of that tablet gaming experience. So that's quite good. I am a huge fan of that for making it a little bit more usable. Like when I picked it up in my hands, it just felt very plasticky. I know obviously all of these devices are made out of plastic, and that's a ridiculous statement, but it just felt very MSI plastic, just a little bit cheap compared to the Steam Deck that is quite solid feeling in your hand, and the ROG Ally with that white design that it has just looks a little bit more premium. Also, the triggers just felt very weak and as if they would break over a period of time. There just wasn't much resistance to the triggers when you were playing. So if you're playing like FPS shooting games, I feel like they would just become very irritating over a period of time, especially compared to my experience with the Steam Deck that I did obviously own and have a lot of hours hands-on with. However, one thing that I do like about the design is the active cooling. This MSI Claw has got so many fan grills everywhere, and also inside of the system itself, it's got like a dual chamber design on the heatsink. So I do think the cooling is going to be much better than all of the other devices, thus resulting in a much lower threshold. It's got a lot of fan grills at the rear, a lot of stuff going on at the back, and also with the front, because things like the Steam Deck and also the ROG Ally get pretty loud when you're actually gaming on them, which makes them very disruptive if you're like on an aeroplane. The guy next to you is thinking, who's this chump with his portable gaming thing? So that would be interesting to see if this allows the fan speeds to be a little bit lower, because it's got a little bit more active cooling with all of these fan grills. This is the key thing when I reviewed the Steam Deck. Everyone was like, fan noise doesn't matter, just put some headphones on. But it's the ambient noise and impact you have of the other people around you, like the courtesy of like other people on the train, on the plane, or even people in your living room. Sure, if you've got noise cancelling headphones on, that's fine for you. You can hear your Spider-Man cinematic stuff all cool. But the dude sat next to you on the plane is probably thinking, who is this irritating guy with his Steam Deck that's like the whole time while you're playing? On the topic of desktop mode, you will obviously be able to dock the MSI Claw and then use it on an external display, but the dock is an additional option. It's not included with that retail price of about $699. It will be an additional extra and cost for you to then obviously leverage the docking performance. This isn't like a shock. It's the same thing with the Steam Deck. If you want the official dock, you got to buy that separately. The ROG Ally did come with a dock, but it was like just a crappy little 3D printed thing that was super cheap, and then you would just literally throw a port, like a plug into the back of the device. So I guess you can't really complain too much that it isn't included, but I guess it would have gave it a little bit more of a competitive edge if it was thrown inside of the box. On the topic of ports that are available on the MSI Claw, there is one micro SD card which will allow you to expand the storage of the device, very similar to a Nintendo Switch and also the Valve Steam Deck. You also have one Thunderbolt 4 port / USB Type-C. This will obviously be leveraged for the display output if you wanted to connect this to an external screen. There's also a headphone jack, so you can connect a pair of wired headphones. It does also support Bluetooth, so you can throw in some wireless headphones if you would prefer. I'm assuming that's what most people would use in 2024 anyways. And then finally, it does have a power button with a fingerprint reader, so an element of security on the device that we haven't seen present on any of the competitors. So you basically got like an Apple style thumbprint or fingerprint scanner to get yourself into the device, just to keep it a little bit more safe and secure. Now, there will be other variations of the MSI Claw available. You can upgrade the internal storage and also the RAM. They'll still all use the exact same Intel Ultra 7 chip, however, so the overall performance will be the same, but this additional storage and so on will be around $749. Personally, I think it will be worth that upgrade for the 1 terabyte internal storage. Like doubling it will give you flexibility for more games, because obviously the modern games are so big, and if you're traveling a lot, you know, you're going to want to have a lot of a large range of titles for you to choose from on there. But overall, I think the MSI Claw is a very impressive product, and it's great to see more competition being in this field of the handheld tech market. If you want to see more coverage from CES 2024 and some of the incredible products that have been released by Asus, you should check out this video next, where we take a look at the world's first 480Hz OLED gaming display.